Jeff is back to interviewing artists and writers on Everything is Awesome. He and his guests cover social issues from a leftist perspective. Check out all his many works at jeffsawesomepods.com. This is an Unspoiled Network podcast. This is Some Spoiled, A Song of Ice and Fire 2, the co-host Switcheroo. The rereading, Return to Westeros. HBO Spoiler Edition, uncut, uncensored, and too hot for your ears. Bringing you the greatest hits from the year 2000. Call in with your requests to the Discord channel now. In this episode, we are covering chapters 38 and 39, Tyrion and Arya. In these chapters, we get to meet the Red Viper. And also, Arya is in the midst of a big change. She's losing Gendry. Welcome to Unspoiled.
Monsters are dangerous, and just now kings are dying like flies.
I am the king!
Fuck the king.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Rashawn.
All right, so we've got our Dornishmen arriving. Can I just tell you how much I am just very excited because I need some hotness. And a lot of these characters I can't picture very well, but Pedro Pascal as the Red Viper was so perfect that it is wedged in my head and just has lodged there forever. And so reading these, I was just like, oh, what a relief. I have a little bit of a break here.
I remember for the show, the incredible excitement around his character making it to the screen, and how much people loved his character. Of course, how incredibly hot he is. And now I'm seeing the characters, got a little spice to him as well here in the books. But and also I remember just the excitement about bringing the Dornishmen into the show. And I remember people talking a lot about the Sand Snakes and how exciting they were, that was probably coming. And then we all know, well, actually I don't know why, but I do remember people being incredibly disappointed with how that all ended up panning out. So I am really excited to read this because from what I remember people saying, it's some really good shit. Like the whole plot that happens in the book with him, with Illyria, what the Sand Snakes really are, what they really do, as opposed to like the three sisters we got that was supposed to just represent like this whole fucking community. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I won't, spoil you, of course, on what it is with the Sand Snakes, but I will at least say I don't think anybody could tell the Sand Snakes apart on the show. They all looked really similar, acted really similar, and played off of one another in very similar ways. And in the book, they are very distinct people. And that was the thing that I was the saddest about, was that they sort of just got thrown together as being like a gang that all are imitating one another, and that's just super not the fucking vibe. So that's all I'll say about that for now. But, okay, so the chapter opens with Tyrion waiting to greet the Dornishmen as they arrive. And he is thinking about how the fact that he has been sent to greet them might be taken as a slight.
Yeah.
We remember how Edmure reacted with the guys that the Freys sent to treat with them.
Mm-hmm. It's a big deal who you send to represent. You know, it tells the person that you're treating with basically how the person in power views you.
Yep.
You know, are you worth me sending my very best? No, you are not.
Indeed. And he's thinking about how that Joffrey should have come. He should have been the one to greet them. He's the king. This is a big deal that they're arriving. But that Joffrey has been telling some racist jokes. And that there has been a general sort of sense of, he doesn't really know how to, like, shut the fuck up. And that might go badly. Yeah. We have, I feel like that is not news. No. The news for me is that they are finally acknowledging that maybe they shouldn't be sending Joffrey to do this kind of shit. Like, that's really what the story is here. Yep, indeed. So, he has been sent with other people to sort of, like, boost the fact that he is, yes, he is a dwarf, but also there are other guys who are actually important here, and so that makes it fine. Yeah,
but they're not important at all. The people that they have sent Tyrion out with, this is like, you know, this is your, not even your B list. This is like your C list, you know?
Yeah, at one point he's like giving the rundown of everybody who came with him to, oh my god.
To Oberyn?
Yes, thank you. My whole brain just went Viper, but I couldn't remember his actual name.
We would have accepted Viper.
I mean, yeah, but like, you know, it's, for Christ's sake. Things are getting bad, man, with this fucking brain of mine. And he recites them all and then thinks to himself, yeah, that sounded really good. But I'm not fooling fucking anybody.
Yeah, but they know I'm full of shit. I know I'm full of shit. Even the guys I just introduced know we're all full of shit.
You know? Yeah. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Being like,
that's the thing, though.
Embarrassed of yourself.
You know, like that's the thing that's so interesting to me is like I make a joke about how they all know that they're like shit, but do they? Because it's very possible these people that have been, you know, asked to do this is probably like the highlight. You know, they haven't been on such important business probably in a little minute. So they are probably really proud to be part of this whole thing.
Oh, God.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. Maybe they really are hip to what's going on, but it makes me laugh to think that these people are like, went home to their wives like, babe, you will never guess what I'm doing tomorrow.
I am finally getting that promotion. Oh, babe, no.
I'm riding out.
What do they call that thing when somebody gets hired just before a place is about to tank so that it can be blamed on them?
Scapegoat?
That is it, but it's like something ceiling. Like, you know, there's a glass ceiling.
I don't know.
For women in general. But then there is the type of, I can't remember it, but somebody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. And it's a phenomenon that is has a lot of like racial tones as well, because they will bring people of color in to helm a company specifically before it just goes under, and they are aware that that's going to happen. And
so that the face of the failure is somebody that's like, you know, as distant from the original people as possible.
Exactly. And then you can be like, well, see, we tried hiring somebody of color, but they just don't know how to run a company. And it all self-confirms.
That all sounds about right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm saying is happening to these people, is that they've been told that they've got like a big thing coming up, when in fact what's happening is that they are just being brought in to be the one to helm the problem and kind of be thrown away. They're disposable.
Yeah, the new face of disaster coming soon to a town near you.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and so they're riding out to meet the Dornishmen, and there's this whole thing with Pod where they're asking him to identify all the banners. Pod is such an endearing character.
I love him,
and it's amazing to me because it would have been very easy for this character to get on my nerves very quickly. You know? But there's just something about him that is so sweet that I just can't help but just like, aw shucks, it literally everything he does is really out of hand, and I'm not doing him any favors. Like, if it was somebody I knew in my real life, it would be incredibly condescending, and I wouldn't be proud of my behavior. But I can't help with Pod. I'm just like, aw, look at him now.
Look at him go. He knows their names.
And at first he's so awkward and shy and doesn't have any confidence, and he knows this material, which he later proves, you know, Tyrion has had him study. But being put on the spot like this, he just clams up, and honestly, same. I have always been like this. It is not like, it is something that I have struggled with, and I have not really ever made any significant headway against. I can know my shit backwards and forwards, but if I am in the wrong environment, you know, I will just blank and stutter and stumble over my own words. But once he gets into the rhythm, he is fucking knocking these pens down. He knows exactly who everybody is. He is telling Bronn that, like, no, that's not a chicken.
Oh, I love that aspect of it, because, like, honestly, some of these coats of arms, if you ever see real ones, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's supposed to be a dragon, and I'm like, it is.
Where are we going that you're seeing coats of arms in real life?
Oh,
what kind of life are you living?
I mean, I have looked into this stuff just out of curiosity when it's described as, like, they're, he'll use different words about the checkers and the way that, like, the colors are divided, or that there's a what's the word when it almost looks like a tooth sort of pattern along the edge that divides it in half, and all of those mean something. Like, all of the choices in how the color is divided mean something, and I always go and look that shit up, because I've looked it up a million times. I don't remember it, because why would I? It means nothing to me. But then you'll see a lot of examples of different coats of arms and the animals. And sometimes it's like not even just that the animal doesn't look like the animal it's allegedly supposed to be, but that, like, it will be a mouse. And I'll be like, who is out here having a mouse for their coat of arms? That feels like such a weird choice that you're sort of playing yourself. But, you know, people have, like, surprising ones a lot of the time. And a chicken, I mean, not out of the question.
I mean,
people will have it. You know, I'm just saying. I'm always surprised. I expect that people are going to want to do something wolfy, liony. These are all very predictable. But then we've got shit where it's like, oh yeah, and that's a baby holding a cupcake. And I'm like, what? You know? So, anyway.
I was about to ask you what yours would be, but then you told me about a flag that's like a baby holding a cupcake, and my brain was like, oh, well, there you go. There it is.
Yeah, I feel maybe like not something a baby, food-related for
maybe
sure.
Maybe like a cat holding a cupcake.
That cat better give me my shit back. I do not think so. Setting a bad precedent for behavior. The glass cliff. Oh. The glass cliff is the phenomenon of women in leadership roles, such as executives in the corporate world and female political election candidates, being likelier than men to achieve leadership roles during periods of crisis when the risk of failure is highest. And a lot of times it is women of color.
That all checks out.
Indeed. Anyway, I was just, like, Googling, like, failure people... glass things. Google was like, baby, glass cliff, is that what you need? Oh, thank you, Google. You understand me so well. So, next, a big black bird on yellow, something pink or white in its claws. The vulture of Blackmont grasps a baby in its talons. What?
Yeah, I guess.
Why? Why, though? Can anybody?
Nope.
And I'm sure that these are all explained somewhere.
Oh, you know they're in that fucking The World of Ice and Fire book, bitch. You know they are.
I have no doubt whatsoever that my question why has been answered. But I'm not asking because I want the answer. I'm asking because...
Why?
Yeah. That crowned skull of House Manwoody, bone and gold on black. You could just say white and gold? But I guess that isn't as funny a joke paired with Manwoody as bone.
Oh my god.
So I guess that's what we're
doing. Why are we doing that? I wasn't doing that. I didn't make that joke connection in my head.
That's what I'm here for.
Oh, Jesus Christ. There's a description, I guess it comes a little bit later, about the 3 types of Dornishmen that I thought was really, really interesting. But before we get to that, their pod is naming all of these flags, and then he's just like, hold up, though. There's not a litter. Mm-hmm. And everybody is just like, what? And I also am everybody. I was like, what? Why is this important? It was such a weird thing. But it turns out to be hella important because the man that they all were going to meet was the other brother, whose name I can't remember. The king, right?
Yeah. And now I'm looking him up because I, of course, also forgot.
And they realized that he has not come at all. It has somebody else has been sent his way because everybody knows that he. It's Prince. It's Prince Doran.
Doran, yeah.
And everybody knows that he's an older man. He is gouty, which is like it's used a lot in these books. It's just sort of a general description of a person, like an overall, as opposed to like. Well, maybe he really does specifically mean this person suffers with gout, right? Mm-hmm. But when you call somebody gouty, I picture, like, they're talking about your whole jam. They're not just talking about, like, your one big toe that's all fucked up.
So what you are thinking is, like, when people call somebody musty.
It's an entire indictment on your whole shit. It's not just talking about how you smell. And I don't know if it's meant that way in these books or not. But
I don't think so.
Because every time it's used, I think, that is so goddamn rude. Like, oh, is that what we're doing? But I don't think it's meant that way.
No, it's definitely not. That is really funny. I did not know you were taking it that way this whole time.
Like, I might start calling people gouty just on now. Oh, like, gouty ass motherfucker. Get the fuck out of here if you say something dumb to me on Facebook.
What do you think it means then? Like,
in my brain it is describing a person who is and this is actually it's not great. Not great, so I won't go into a whole description. But generally, it's sort of like a person who is like slovenly, lazy, like doesn't eat well, doesn't take very good care of themselves.
So
kind of. And you know what, too, like if I want to be real about it, I don't want to like sidetrack the whole fucking podcast and get on the whole thing. But I think a lot of it is like sort of steeped in a kind of a fat phobia.
Yeah.
Because you tend to think of people being like overweight and lazy and they eat like shit, you know, and don't take care of themselves, and then they get the gout, and then they lose a toe, and then they lose a foot, and they can't walk around, and you know what I mean? Just sort of like a not great shit.
The thing that's kind of funny to me is that a podcast that I listened to a couple years ago, one of the hosts got gout. And it was a result of him dieting, actually. He was trying to do the keto thing. And that can be a real problem because gout is like, it's comes from a similar place as, like, kidney stones, where you have too much of, like, a certain protein, I think it is, and your kidneys can't handle it, and you begin to build up this byproduct in your system that normally your body can get rid of pretty easily. There's too much of it because you're eating so many, usually animal products. This is where it kind of comes from. And this person, they'd been doing keto and they'd been very intense about it. And they wound up with gout, and they said to this day that is the most painful thing they have ever experienced in their life.
Yeah,
they're like, I've broken bones, I've done all kinds of shit, but that was so horrible.
Yeah, it's supposed to be really, really bad. Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder about, because, like, I wonder if there are different types of it as well, because are there, like, the gout that this person had was obviously a result of their diet, and they changed their diet, and then it was over. Is there a type of gout that isn't dependent on diet, that is like a genetic thing only? Or do they just call things gout in this period because they don't know what else to call it? And that's not even what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the way it's used throughout the books, I don't know if it's describing, like, a particular injury, that makes a person... Because they don't really tell us a lot about Prince Doran here.
No.
Just that, word on the street is that, he's kind of an old man who is not very physically capable of doing any sort of strenuous labor or exercise or anything. Can't ride a horse, so he rides in a litter. There's also sort of in my mind, a sort of inference that he is, again, like, kind of lazy and passive and, not very strong and has to be carried around, all that kind of stuff. Even Oberyn says something about, like, when he's saying something about, like, how I'm here instead of my brother, and how that's sort of you thought you were getting this other guy who is much more malleable and peaceful and doesn't have, like, a lot of aggression and whatever, compared, to him, who is clearly not lacking in aggression at all. And I feel like the whole gouty thing is, like, tied up into that as well. So it becomes less of a specific physical ailment and more of a sort of, like, loose term to describe a person,
I want to read some of the notes here from Austin, because there's some information about the Dornish and, like, the deal with them. So it says the rest of Westeros was peopled by two migrations: the first men, who spread across the whole continent, and the Andals, who conquered all but the Iron Islands and the north. Dorne was the site of a third migration, the Rhoynar. The Rhoynar originally lived in western Essos and were a rival to Valyria, which is where all of the Targaryens are from, with a culture similar to ancient Egypt. After several wars, the Rhoynar were eventually conquered and were forced to flee their homeland. After years of searching for a new home, the majority of them, led by Princess Nymeria, who Arya named her wolf after, settled in Dorne, and Nymeria married into House Martell. Why the official name of the house is House Nymeros Martell, which is interesting. I didn't know that. While the Rhoynar adopted the language and religion of the Andal Dornish, the Dornish adopted the Rhoynar's customs of allowing women equal inheritance, a tolerance of homosexuality and polyamory, and little to no stigma toward bastard children. Dorne is also unique in that they were the only kingdom that managed to fight off Aegon the Conqueror, and not just fight him off. They succeeded in killing one of his 3 dragons and one of his sister wives. The Dornish remained independent for nearly 200 more years, fending off other invasions by Westeros, only entering into the Seven Kingdoms by marriage when the Targ king married the daughter of the Prince of Dorne about 120 years before the start of the books. Also note, Oberyn and Doran are referred to as princes, not lords, another Dornish custom. So, just some info dump for you there, but I feel like it helps inform some things about the culture, especially once we get more into that a little bit later.
Right.
So, yeah, thank you very much, Austin. always out here, not only sending this information, but posting them into the Discord channel so that people can see the full extent of the notes, even if I don't read them all. And just really appreciate it. He's really, like, he always posts it within, like, you know, an hour or two of me putting the episode up. He's just, like, waiting. Which is truly more attention.
Give that man a producer credit.
Honestly,
there, we just did it. You just got a producer credit.
Producer credit and
and done.
I'm trying to think of the 40% on the back end, but I don't have
on the back end.
So, I mean,
well, actually, according to Owen, your back end is quite magnificent.
You got a butt that won't quit. Oh, Brussels.
$5. Get out of here.
Do you know how we'll do the, like, trenchant commentary every now and then?
Mm-hmm.
I was just watching an old episode of The Simpsons with Owen because we finished season 10 and it was so bad that he couldn't bear to continue. So we just went back and started over.
That's really the only right thing to do.
And there is an old episode where Lisa needs a new saxophone because she's in the midst of the talent show.
Oh my God, she needs the
4.5
inch reed. Yeah, yeah. Lisa, stop making a lot of noise with your saxophone. That's it. That's all he remembers what she needs.
Yeah, so he's in Moe's and he's like talking shit about the owner of the music store for not being open.
Mm-hmm.
And the music store owner happens to be sitting right next to him at the bar and is like, I happen to own that music store. And Homer yells, damn me and my trenchant mouth.
Yep.
And I think that really should be something that I knew about already. I'm kind of mad at the fact that I had to stumble across that in the wild.
I didn't realize you didn't. Well, actually, why would you? That's a really old episode, and you know,
they look weird.
But yeah, that's. I won't get into a whole Simpsons thing. I'll spare you all that. But it is a really marked difference from like OG Homer to what is now most commonly known as Homer, where the Homer that exists in our imaginations now would never even know that word to use.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a really funny running joke about Homer that's been dropped over the years, but Homer is obsessed with the Supreme Court. And weirdly knows a lot of information about various judges. And in the first years, there was like a lot of throwaway jokes and a lot of, you know, that didn't really land or whatever. But yeah, Homer has a weird thing about the Supreme Court.
That is so weird. One of the things I loved about this particular episode, like, they didn't have a lot of the characters figured out yet. And there is a moment, because it summarized, Homer buys Lisa a pony because he feels really bad that she clearly doesn't love him anymore because he is never there for her. And there's a moment where she's riding by on her pony and Ralph Wiggum says,
but what man can tame her?
And he's got this like very masculine voice and it's just so weird.
Oh, she's really tamed that horse. But what man can possibly tame her or something like that?
Yep. I just like that when I stopped and looked at Owen and he just went, they hadn't quite had it all figured out yet. And then we just moved on. But it was so startling that I was like, what did he just say? And also has, like I said, a very different voice actor.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
Anyway.
Yeah, you're right, because I was about to go into a whole thing. Like, Nelson used to have his own band of bullies. Like, Nelson wasn't always one of the bullies with, like, Jimbo and Kearney and Dolph. He had his own two little henchmen.
Nice.
That disappeared pretty early on. And then they did a really...
mysterious
right? They did a really fun thing. Years later, they had an episode that kind of mocked, fucking Warriors, that movie Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So they had an episode that mocked that where they all had a big gang meeting of all the bullies in Springfield. And Nelson runs into his two former sidekicks and everybody is like, who are those guys? He's like, oh, just some guys I used to know.
So awkward.
All right. Enough of that, though. Okay, all right. Because I could really literally just keep going all day. Nobody wants to hear that.
Guys, we're going to do an Unsober on The Simpsons. I've already told Rashawn. She wanted Owen to come
I'm not good. I don't think I'm going to do it because you won't let Owen join us.
Rashawn, it would be unlistenable. It would be unlistenable. I will never, ever sway from that POV. I have been around you two, and I know what it's like, and I'm not subjecting any listener to that. Not happening. If you want to go ahead and pop your phone on when you come visit the next time and record the two of you and post that as an episode, feel free. Just absolutely, oh my God. I
posted this thing the other day asking people to share like a good memory of them or their favorite memory, and mine is just the first time we met and we just completely ruined brunch because we would not stop with the Simpsons shows. It was so obnoxious.
Was that at the Arboretum?
No, when we first met in Orlando for the first time, we went ahead with that amazing brunch.
Place.
Yeah. Those waffles were fucking banging. It was like a Waffle House, but like 10 tiers higher. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was so good. But we would not stop. It was so bad.
Yeah, it was either they were quoting The Simpsons at each other or they were making fun of me. Which I couldn't even be mad at because they were getting along so well.
It was a delightful time.
All right.
Okay. So where are we? Oh, they're running forward to meet the group because they realize that the litter is missing, but this whole cavalry of people, cavalry's not the right word, but this retinue or whatever, this
cavalcade,
is
that what you wanted?
They're still really far away, and Tyrion is just like, oh fuck this, I can't stand here waiting for them to get to us. Mm-hmm. So they go and meet them halfway. And this is where we get the little the bit about there's 3 types of Dornishmen, which is kind of like along the lines of what Austin was just sharing with us.
Right.
And it says that there are the salty Dornishmen that live by the coast, the sandy Dornishmen that are in the deserts, and the stony Dornishmen who are in the mountains. And the salty Dornishmen have the most Rhoynish blood, and the stony Dornishmen the least. And then there's a description about what they look like, and they're, with the exception of the ones that live in the mountain, they're more like fair and have lighter colored hair and freckle instead of turning brown. But the salty and the sand ones are very dark skinned. Well, not very dark skinned, but much darker than everybody else that we've met so far. And they get even darker in the sun, and they have like dark eyes and dark hair. So this is, I'm trying to imagine, like, them coming into King's Landing, which from what I can tell is, like, super white. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that as I was reading the chapter, and then, like, 2 beats later, Oberyn is like, yo, where can we find a blonde bitch? We've never had one. They seem quite exotic to us.
Oh, my God. Yeah. He is right away, just like, so we're going to fuck. My girl is kind of interested. She's been wondering about it. And we're going to share this one. And it's like, I'm really delighted because I know that it had been hinted at, but I couldn't remember how, canon it was that he was bisexual. But, yeah, it's explicitly stated. And he's just like, oh, I'll go for it. If you're hot, you're hot. That's it. And there is a point at which, when Tyrion is talking to him, he has like a sort of like vibe in his reply, and Tyrion says, well, this one's sure a salty Dornishman, and I don't think it's meant to be salty in the way that we use it now. We're like, oh, are you salty about something?
Oh,
but
right.
That was definitely how it felt in the context of like, oh yeah, this is a salty Dornishman, that's for sure. And I just had a moment where I had to like stop and not laugh because it was... it felt so like inappropriate.
It's like, well, 2 things can be true at the same time.
That's true. He
is both salty in the way that we mean it and salty in the way that George Martin means it.
Yes, that's true. The lords wore silk and satin robes with jeweled belts and flowing sleeves. Their armor was heavily enameled and inlaid with burnished copper, shining silver, and soft red gold. They came astride red horses and golden ones, and a few as pale as snow, all slim and swift, with long necks and narrow, beautiful heads. The fabled sand steeds of Dorne were smaller than proper war horses and could not bear such weight of armor, but it was said that they could run for a day and a night and another day and never tire. And
I love that Tyrion. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I love that Tyrion pretends that he's like, well, and which of you is Prince Doran, mayhaps? Like, even though we already know.
Being real passive-aggressive here. I'm sorry, did that email not get through? I thought I sent it, but it might have gone to spam. That might explain why you're doing this wrong thing right now. And too fit and far too fierce. How many Dornishmen does it take to start a war? Yet he had no choice but to smile. And Oberyn is like, yeah, so my brother's not coming. And he has sent me to join King Joffrey's council in his stead. And Tyrion, His Grace will be most honored to have the counsel of a warrior as renowned as Prince Oberyn of Dorne, said Tyrion, thinking, this will mean blood in the gutters.
Yeah, this is, once you get the backstory, this is like a real aggressive move. To send this person in particular, who we find out, oh my God, there's a bit too, as he's again introducing, you know, his people, and we meet Illyria last, and Illyria is his own paramour, and she is a bastard, and Tyrion is just like, oh my God, Cersei is going to completely lose her shit.
Yep.
She can't come to the wedding. Where am I going to put her to sit? You know, like, this is, you know, like, this is a problem I don't need. And they haven't even made it to King's Landing proper yet. And already this is bringing me trouble.
He's got Ajita. And, yeah, this is when he does the introductions. Permit me to acquaint you with them, my Lord of Lannister. Sir Desiel Dalt of Lemonwood, Lord Trimon Gargolin, Lord Harmon Uller and his brother Sir Ulwick, Sir Ryan Illyrian and his natural son Sir Daemon Sand, the bastard of God's grace, Lord Dagos Manwoody, his brother Sir Miles, his sons Mors and Dickon. Can we just talk about this for just a second? We've got Dagos Manwoody, which I don't know, this does not work. But then we've got Miles Manwoody, which feels like a thing. Mors Manwoody, which feels like a very much a thing. And then we've got Dickon Manwoody, which just, come on. Like, okay, at this point, it feels very on purpose. And I don't know. I just never, like, stopped to notice the Manwoody first names before, and I should have.
I mean, he did put a lot of care into this, so give that man his due.
Fucking, and like Dickon is not a name. I have heard that name before. So when he like kind of snorts at it in the show when he's introduced to a different Dickon, the whole joke for me, I was just like, that's a very common name though. Like, really? And here, because it's with Manwoody, I'm like, all right. If they had done this, then it would have made a lot more sense that he snorts to himself. But it's fine. And this is when Oberyn is like, everybody take a look at how much they love us, that they sent the imp to greet us. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. This is not how you behave, sir.
He is aggro, for sure.
I guess we are really about to see that he is not interested in playing a lot of the games that are played here, or at least thinks that he is going to. Well, he thinks a lot of things. Clearly, we find out that he is here for justice, and that they end up having a whole conversation about that later. But yeah, he has come with an agenda, and he's not even trying to hide it.
No,
which, to be fair, is a little refreshing.
I know, right? I can't hate it. It's more like, it's that I'm not even mad, I'm kind of impressed. Because the fact that they just decide that, oh no, we're going to make it extremely clear that we're giving them the finger. that just really does take some balls and confidence that you can back
that shit up. And we're not, we don't get to see a lot of that, you know. So this just feels like a very kind of like interesting and sort of fresh approach compared to what we've been getting a lot of.
Yeah.
Then we get some backstory on Oberyn and his reputation, and it is impressive. From sleeping with some man's woman when he was a teenager, and then having a duel in which he ends up accidentally killing the guy. It wasn't a duel to the death.
Accidentally, in quotes.
Right? Like, it wasn't supposed to be a duel to the death. They just, like, each got injured, but then the man ended up dying from his wounds, so oops.
Yeah, that's where he got his name, because people think that he poisoned the blade. Mm-hmm. It's not, like, confirmed, but...
There's a talk that he actually then went to the Citadel to learn, you know, poison in a much more, like, official and academic setting.
I like the idea that he didn't poison his blade, but once everybody started to say that's what happened, he was like, oh, that's a sick idea, though. Right? I am going to do that. Thanks.
Since y'all mentioned it. He fought as like a sellsword, had his own company for a while. He's been, you know, done a lot of traveling. And then the rumors, of course, about his sexuality and that he's got all these bastard girls and that the daughters are called the Sand Snakes. And also that it seems like he's never fathered a son, which I think is really, really interesting. Like, I don't think it means anything, but it's just a really fun little detail.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me because apparently, and I may be speaking out of my ass here, but I remember learning when I was studying what was going on with King Henry VIII that it's the sperm that determines the sex of the child, not like, and so, you know, it would often be blamed on the mother if she didn't give birth to a son, but that was really determined by the father. And the fact that King Henry kept having girl children and blaming his wives for it, it was actually explicitly something that was coming from him.
I mean, probably.
Right, you know.
I think that's right. I can't remember. The only thing I remember about that is that all fertilized eggs start out, is what we understand, in a very limited way, to be female. And then something happens and it will, you know, you might get a man. Again, very like
horrific mutation.
Basically, like something goes terribly wrong and next thing you know, man.
You just spoke a whole fucking sermon. Something goes terribly wrong, and next thing you know, man. Oh, there's so much in that phrase. Anyway, oh God, he really got me with that one.
So, and then there's also the tournament that ended up injuring the Tyrell's son, Willis, right? And that it was Oberyn who did that. And now he is in town, and just in time for a wedding, which happens to include a Tyrell.
Indeed.
So, like, this is just going to be socially awkward, politically awkward, a very, like, tense situation that needs to be handled carefully, so that no one is offended. You know, everybody's egos have to be sort of stroked and be very careful what everybody says. And if the wrong person says the wrong thing, basically everything is going to go to shit.
Yeah.
You know? But none of this can be really addressed right now in this moment. So this is all stuff Tyrion's thinking, but the stuff that they're saying, they're having like this really fake sort of pleasant conversation, but there is a lot of like, well, I'll say a hint of like derision in Oberyn's voice every time he speaks to Tyrion. And then he just launches in to the most offensive story to tell someone to their fucking face.
Yup.
It's awful. And Tyrion has to just sit there and listen to it and kind of, you know, he can't be as insulted as he should be. He can't, like, lash out or anything. He just has to listen to the story and, like, chuckle and make jokes, and it's the worst.
I hated it.
Yeah, it's really fucking awful.
So the story is about how Tyrion was the worst disappointment of all.
Mm-hmm.
Because they went over to Casterly Rock, like, right after his mother died. To which Tyrion is like, that's a weird time to visit. And he says, let's see, your father ignored us the whole time. I was going to say
exactly what I was going to say. Like, I loved it. He's like, your father was so rude to us. And his wife just died. What are y'all doing there?
Yep. And the cell they gave me had a feather bed to sleep in and Mirish carpets on the floor, but it was dark and windowless, much like a dungeon when you come down to it, as I told Elia at the time. Your skies were too gray, your wines too sweet, your women too chaste, your food too bland, and you yourself were the greatest disappointment of all. And Tyrion's like, I was a literal infant. What do you mean? And he's like, we thought you were going to be a real monster. And instead, you were just like this kind of weird-looking baby that was not monstrous the way that we had been promised. And it was just a huge letdown after everybody said you had a fucking tail.
Right, I was going to say,
your head was like 3 times too big.
You're supposed to have, like, teeth growing out, like, in lion's claws and a beard. Mm-hmm. And then you were nothing but an ugly baby. That's what we got. We went up to see you, and you were just an ugly baby.
He says that Elia made that noise that girls make when they see babies. You know the noise. The one that they use when they see, like, kittens and stuff. So, like, yeah, it really wasn't... It was not a big deal. And
then how Cersei behaves when they're there. Like, Cersei, like, sneaks them. Well, she doesn't have to sneak because she just tells the fucking milk lady that, like, you have to let us in or my father will cut your tongue out. So there's not really a lot of sneaking involved. But
you're just a milk cow, and cows don't need tongues. They just need udders.
Yeah. This is like an 8-year-old Cersei. BTW. But, then she, like, takes him out of his swaddling clothes so they can get, like, a whole look of his body, which is just really gross when you think about what she's doing here.
Yeah.
And then she pinches him to make him cry. Like, takes his dick, really, and, like, twists it till he's screaming. And doesn't stop until Jaime tells her to stop. It's just the whole thing is... I mean, I get it. They're, like, children, and children will do these kinds of things. Maybe not the fucking twisting of a baby's cock to make them scream, but the sort of sneaking in to see them, you know, little kids with their imaginations. They've heard all these wild tales that the grown-ups are probably talking about, and taking it out of context, they, you know, get this image in their head of what they're going to see, and then they get there, and it's just an entire letdown.
Yeah. So, and of course, she says something about how, she said, it doesn't matter. Everyone says he's like to die soon. He shouldn't even have lived this long.
Yeah.
The sun was shining bright above them, and the day was pleasantly warm for autumn, but Tyrion Lannister went cold all over when he heard that. My sweet sister. He scratched at the scar of his nose and gave the Dornishman a taste of his evil eye. Now why would he tell such a tale? Is he testing me? Or simply twisting my cock, as Cersei did, so he can hear me scream? Be sure and tell that story to my father. It will delight him as much as it did me. The part about my tail, especially. I did have one, but he had it lopped off. So, then we go to the accusation that Tyrion is taxing prostitution. And that everybody is blaming him for it, even though it was his father's idea. Yeah.
They need to pay for this fucking wedding, so they're going to do it with a penny tax on whoring. Mm-hmm. And now people, like small folk and everyone else, has just got another reason to shit on Tyrion's name. He's completely taken the blame for this. What did you just tell us about? The glass cliff?
The glass cliff, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it does feel like he's being pushed to the edge of that, for sure.
So he has to bear the brunt of everybody's, outrage and disgust at this, and it's being used, not his idea, it's being used to pay for something he thinks is, overpriced anyway. Mm-hmm. And he has to be the one to suffer, all the insults about it. So he's just in a really shit position. And this is when Oberyn is asking about, where can I find that blonde bitch at, though? And Tyrion doesn't answer right away. He's just like, I'm married, so I don't know about this.
I don't know what you're talking about. What is sex?
And then this is when Oberyn tells him that he is here for justice. Because it starts off with a little bit of he starts talking about the wedding and how there's going to be 77 dishes, and then Tyrion's like, are you hungry? And then I've hungered for a long time, though not for food. Oh my God. When will the justice be served?
I swear to God, when I was listening to this audiobook, that sounded like a totally fine thing to say. But when you just said it right here, I can't take it at all.
I mean, come on now. It is a ridiculous bit of back and forth right here, but I will allow it.
It truly is, but I really just didn't. I was just picturing Pedro Pascal, who can get away with fucking anything, I think is what was going on there.
That's fair, though. Just picturing him makes a lot of things a lot more tolerable.
Mm-hmm.
So, fucking Oberyn says to Tyrion's question about being close with his sister,
oh my God.
We were inseparable, much like your own brother and sister. Which, does he know?
He has to know.
He's got to know, right?
I feel like he must. I don't know.
So I didn't know what to do with that particular line. I don't know if he's nudge, nudge, wink, wink, or if he really has no idea and is saying it in very 100% sincerity,
Or maybe he's just referencing the way they were when he went to visit.
That's probably really what's happening here.
Yeah.
Is he's thinking of them as when he went to visit his children. I feel like that's probably the most likely scenario. But I had the same reaction that Tyrion does, right? Exactly. He's just like, God, I fucking hope not. But, and he also tries to say, listen, we've been busy with warring, and we got weddings happening, and also that shit was almost 20 years ago. But I promise, once things calm down, we will absolutely open up an investigation. We will investigate ourselves. We're like Congress. Mm-hmm. We'll investigate ourselves. And Oberyn is just cuts him off in the middle. Just don't lie to my face.
Yep.
We're don't treat me like we think we're stupid. And this is when he does the bit about his brother not being a bloodthirsty man, but that he is.
Yes. Yeah, he's just part of the reason I am here is because I am going to get shit done that needs getting done. Mm-hmm. And we needed somebody who was going to have more of an iron hand about this. An old Septon once claimed I was living proof of the goodness of the gods. Do you know why that is? No. Why, if the gods were cruel, they would have made me my mother's firstborn and Doran her third. I am a bloodthirsty man, you see. And it is me you must contend with now, not my patient, prudent, and gouty brother.
I really did enjoy that.
Yep.
Yeah. And then Tyrion claps back, though.
Yeah.
He's just like, hey, you see that shit up there?
Mm-hmm.
That's called King's Landing. And Oberyn tries to be kind of sassy back, oh, I can smell it. And he's like, well, can you smell all these motherfuckers there that will kill you for me if I tell them to?
There was something about that for me that I just was like, I get that you are feeling like, we're being aggressive, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I did kind of feel like Tyrion, I don't know if this is the way to respond to it. I don't know. It's like he's had so many personal insults happening, though, that it's hard to really blame him for maybe losing his temper and just saying a thing because he's getting pissed now.
Yeah.
You know?
Oberyn has pushed for a reaction, and he finally does get one by, asserting that he's here basically for vengeance, though he's calling it justice. He says outright, I'm going to have Clegane. He's going to answer for that shit. Mm-hmm. He calls him the enormity that rides, too, which really made me laugh. Because he calls Tyrion an enormity when Tyrion is like, what did you expect? I was just a baby. Mm-hmm. So that word, I think, means more than just, like, it implies, like, not just size, but, like, monstrosity as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's mentioned that Jon Arryn had actually gone to Sunspear, I guess. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right after Robert got the throne. And they had, like, an inquiry trying to figure out, like, what the fuck happened. But I guess nothing was really found out in a way that was satisfying. And no one ever was held accountable for what happened to his sister and her children. So that's something that they've been carrying for 16 years now. And it's, again, salty.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Tyrion claps back with how many, like, guards they have and how many swords they have, and it's in the tens of thousands, versus this, like, 300 that have come with Oberyn. And he is not impressed.
No, he is not.
And so then Tyrion, like, goes a step further, and is because there's a lot of, like, saucy talk around, like, metaphors and stuff. So there's a bit about the Tyrells being in the city and how many of them there are. To which Oberyn replies about, like, well, the sun will fucking always humble a rose. And Tyrion has been pushed far enough that he actually just says right out, oh, like you trample Willis. Mm. And it says that his reaction was not what Tyrion expected. And what we get is that really, this was not, as far as I can tell, Oberyn does not count this as any sort of unfair thing or thing that he should be ashamed of. Mm-hmm. That it wasn't his fault. He shouldn't have been in the fucking thing in the first place. Yeah. And that also, he slipped, his foot slipped. It was his fault the horse came down. Mm-hmm. And really his father was just trying to fucking stunt and should never have put his son in that tournament anyway. He was too fucking young. Yeah. And that also he's kept in touch with Willis. And
that was what I found the most interesting is the fact that, like, apparently the Tyrells hold this huge grudge, but Willis himself does not. Mm-hmm. And I find that really, like, telling.
It's one of those things, right? You take an insult or an injury to your house, to your people, to your name, right? Mm-hmm. It becomes less about the insult or injury to the individual who was impacted. Yeah. And it becomes this other thing that's about, like, your pride of the family or the house, Mm-hmm. So the Tyrells will, be complaining about this for ages and, raising their fists angrily at the name Martell because of this great injustice. Meanwhile, Willis is like, that's not what happened, though. Yeah. No, it wasn't any of this that you're trying to make it into.
And it's also interesting to me that the way Oberyn frames this is basically like, that's how Mace Tyrell always was with his kids, was he wanted them all to be like these amazing jousters. Mm-hmm. And so he would push them before they were really ready. And we know that Loras is, like, amazing at it. Mm-hmm. And now kind of stopping and thinking about, is that the product of having been pushed way too hard as a kid?
It definitely feels like it, especially if you think about Loras being younger than Willis and having seen his older brother go down in this way. The amount of pressure that was probably then put on Loras had to be, immense, right? Mm-hmm. I love this bit, too, when, because Tyrion is trying to be like, well, Loras is that dude, though. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if you've heard, but And fucking Oberyn is like, yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah, he calls him Renly's little rose.
Yes, he does.
Rude, sir.
And Tyrion tries to say, Loras even beat Jaime. And Oberyn is like, defeat, you mean unhorse in a fucking tournament.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you want to frighten me, I need to hear about what he's done in battle. And Tyrion tries to say, well, he killed, this guy and that guy at the Blackwater. And people saw it. They saw him fighting right next to Lord Renly's ghost, which, Tyrion, sir.
Why?
Leave that part out.
Sir, you have to know. Come on. He said that shit, and I was so annoyed with him.
I couldn't believe he blurts that out. Because then Oberyn is just like, oh.
Yes. The ghost.
Your witnesses, huh? They also saw ghosts. Yes. This is all really standing up to intense scrutiny. And I think that doesn't it end with like Tyrion just kind of like telling him which whorehouse to go to and then riding ahead because he's tired of this conversation?
Yes. Chataya's on the Street of Silk has several girls who might suit your needs. Dancy has hair the color of honey. Marie's is pale white gold. I would advise you to keep one or the other by your side at all times. Oh, and why is that? You want to die with a breast in hand, you said. And then he canters off. And he's just like, I probably shouldn't have handled it that way, but you know what? I am sick of this motherfucker.
He's like, shit, I could have just let Joffrey come and do it for the way I handled it. Like, he wouldn't have been he wouldn't have been any different.
And it said, he could have asked Prince Oberyn if he knew how a Dornishman differed from a cow flop. That made him grin despite himself. He would have to make a point of being on hand when the Red Viper was presented to the king. And I do really enjoy the idea that he's like, you know what, I was all worried about this, but that's kind of not my fucking problem at the moment. So I'm going to just enjoy the inevitable shit show that will result from that whole thing. And I think that we have all been there.
That just fucking eating popcorn gif. Like you're just gonna just fucking watch the carnage.
Yep, exactly. Okay, before we move on to the next chapter, let's take a little break and we will be right back. So then we go to Arya's chapter. And we are taking down the mummers.
Yeah, we just open up, and I would, with these chapters, sometimes it feels like a smoother transition, and sometimes it doesn't. This, I was just plopped down into the middle of some shit that was already happening, and I was confused. Like, who are we fighting? What is happening? How did we get here?
Agreed. I felt a little bit weird about it, because it was like, this is the thing that I ran into with the last Arya chapter, is that they just start off with taking the hood off of her. And it's treated like we should know that she was, oh my god, what's the word I want? Blindfolded. And I was like, wait, why? By who? Why would they do that? And then eventually you get given some more information, but it felt weird because he doesn't do this that often with the way he starts off chapters. George R. R. Martin tends to slowly ease his way into things, like the telling things sort of backward isn't really his style, and I was just surprised by it.
Yeah, I like I said, I found it to be a little disorienting at first, and then I kind of like got my bearing. Was like, okay, I see. All right, I see where we are now. Okay. But it took me a minute. But yeah, so they have encountered some mummers and had a pretty intense fight, which she is kept well out of the way of.
Indeed.
And just, despite her instincts to kind of like want to either get in there or run, she is like, but when you're in the middle of a battle, you have to obey. So I do
appreciate
chill.
that about her. She's like, look, I may be rebellious, but I'm not a fucking dickhead.
So yeah, we get descriptions of who made it out, and a lot of people don't. Then there's this Septon Ut, or Ut, depending. And this fucking guy.
Yeah.
This guy. It is not said explicitly, but he's up to some shenanigans with young boys who he ends up killing when he's done with.
Mm-hmm.
And it is known that he does this.
Yeah.
And he does that fucking thing. I've sinned, I know, forgive me, I've sinned, I'm a weak man. You can't hold it against me because I'm so weak. Ugh, yuck.
Yup.
Yuck. And double yuck for how fucking accurate it is.
It is.
How many times do we see these people fucking crying into the camera after they get caught on some bullshit, you know? Ugh. Remember that time in the 80s? You might be too young. But there was a time in the late 80s where, like, every televangelist got caught doing the most fucked up shit, and they all, like, cried on their TV shows. Like
Do not remember, but ew.
Oh, yeah. It was a real problem in the late 80s. Just sobbing. The Jim Baker one is probably the most famous, I think, but there were a couple of other ones. But, yeah, he just would not stop crying. And
what was his deal? I don't remember this guy.
Jim Baker, Tammy Baker.
Oh, Tammy Faye Baker with a mascara? That's what I know.
Yes.
Is that she wore a lot of mascara.
Yeah, so her and her husband had a huge empire that included, like, televangelism. They had a theme park, just like tons of money. He was an adulterer, and also, they got caught, like, embezzling or tax avoidance or whatever. You know, he ended up going to jail, if I'm not mistaken, for, like, tax shit. But when it all finally, but they had this huge empire, and when it started to crack and it crumbled, he would make these pleas, you know, and it was all just about he's a sinner, but God has forgiven him, and if only the people could forgive him, and just like tears streaming down his face, begging, you know. Yeah. Ugh.
The idea that God had forgiven him, too. Like, look at your situation, my man. It doesn't seem like he has. I don't know if I would just be making that claim with such confidence.
I don't know what he's up to anymore, but, like, before Tammy Faye died, she was making the rounds on, like, reality TV and stuff, and I always really liked her for, like, doesn't make any sense, but I've always really liked Tammy, even when I was a little girl. And eventually Jim Baker got out of prison, and last I heard, which is probably like 15 years old by now, but he was back on TV.
Oh my God.
And as a church person, but like centered in Branson, Missouri, and is like never reached the heights he had before, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I hope not.
But yeah, just sort of back at it.
Man, people, what? Why are... All right. Sure.
So, this guy is known, and they are going to try the people that they managed to capture that weren't, like, killed or made it away. Like, there's some Dothraki that, like, made it away. And they say they're going to give them a trial. They're not just going to hang them outright. They are going to, like, let them stand trial, and then we find out that they all, like, were found guilty because they're all hanging from a tree the next morning. Indeed.
There's a trial, but it's sort of a, we're just going to talk about why we're doing it. Is pretty much what the trial is.
Meanwhile, Arya is feeling a real way because she has not recovered from the fact that the hound was basically let go. She does not feel happy about that at all.
And I mean, it really did, like, oh, okay, so they just got hanged like this, but this man, I was a witness. I know what he did, and he admitted it to me. And yet, you were just like, well, but he won that sword fight, though. Mm-hmm. She does not look kindly upon this.
Yeah, no, and she shouldn't.
Agreed.
And then she sort of, you know, proved right a little bit.
Yes.
in like a page or two.
Yeah, because he just rolls up and is just like, I love when they're like, what did you do to our sentries? And he's like, maybe I killed them. What do you think of that? What if I did? And then it turns out they were just fucking asleep.
His whole energy, they have let him go. We find out that the only thing they really did from him, tended his wounds. They fixed his sword, but they did take all the gold he had. Mm-hmm. So when he comes back, he's coming back for his shit. And they're like, well, it's gone. We already sent it, down the road to help the poor and needy and whatever the fuck. And he's like, yeah, that's what I was going to do with it too. I was also going to help the poor and the needy.
Oh my god. I really don't want to like him as much as I do, but he gets me sometimes, man.
He walks in the middle of them knighting Gendry, and he's like, the fuck is this shit? It's like, this is a really important, meaningful moment for Gendry. He just heckles it.
Oh, that's the word. He's the heckler.
God. Oh my god.
I love it. How would you if you were doing a stand-up and somebody started heckling?
Oh my god.
What would you do?
I don't know. I'd like to think I'd heckle back, but I don't know if it would count as a heckle. Like, it's just telling somebody, fuck you. Is that a heckle? I don't think that's a heckle.
I think it counts if they're in the middle of a like set and you just go ahead and say whatever you feel like. I think no matter what you say, it counts as heckling.
No, I'm talking. Oh, well, I thought. As the person that's performing, what would I do if I started getting heckled? And I said I would like to heckle them back.
Yeah.
But
you don't think that heckling back counts as heckling because they're not on stage.
No. I don't know if my heckle back would count because I would just tell them, fuck you, which isn't really a heckle.
I don't know. I still think that counts, but I understand your concerns. They've been heard. I always think about how I would really just want to walk down and be like, sir, did you have something to say? Here. And just give him the mic and just see what happens out of pure curiosity, not even
That always goes really poorly. I've seen a couple of times where that's happened in videos, and the person always clams up and Yeah. I think once I saw a video where the person in the audience actually was kind of funny and kept going, and it got away from the stand-up. You could tell they regretted putting the mic in that person's face.
I love that. I want to see that. He was just heckling so that he could get his fucking tight five in there.
Yeah, it was on a back when I had more patience for stand-up comics, it was like a documentary or something, or a special or whatever the fuck, and they were just talking about, it was comedians talking about their experiences with audiences and stuff, and they were showing clips of different things, and I think that's where I saw it. It was some comic, and it had just gotten out of hand.
Stand-up is one of those things that I find really fascinating, but I would never want to... the idea of just, I'm coming out here to make you laugh, and that's explicitly what I am supposed to do. That's too much pressure. If I am funny on the podcast, that's just a fucking byproduct of me just having a conversation, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to go out there with this,
Yeah. What it takes to be a successful stand-up is also, I think, directly tied to why a lot of male stand-ups, anyway, seem to become so toxic as they get older.
How's that?
I think they really are tied together. I think that it's a combination of... One of the things comics will always talk... I don't know what they're doing, the kids are doing today, but one of the things comics would always talk about is how they are, really this disaffected subgroup that doesn't really fit in anywhere, and yet they have this desire to do this really insanely scary thing, which is to stand up in front of a room of strangers and try to make them laugh. It's it is one of the most terrifying things that most people could think of taking on. And then you have these people who generally consider themselves as kind of not really understood, and a lot of the male comics anyway will go on and on about how awkward they were, and they weren't really a hit with the ladies, and you take this small, weak guy, right? who then jumps on stage and does a thing that the biggest, toughest guys that he went to school with could never pull off, right? So and then to become successful at it, right? And then all the things about yourself that you use to put yourself in that position to, like, confront that fear and overcome it and do the thing that you feel like you're put on this earth to do, you, like, managed it, right? You get to the other side of it, and then you find, like, some success in it. And then from there, you look back out onto the world and you see people who are struggling, who are disaffected, who are, you know, weak if they're considered weak or whatever, and you suddenly lack compassion. You know, it's just a weird thing, like, because you did it, you made it through it, right? So then it's like a weird, like, loathing of weakness.
What's your
right?
excuse?
Kind of. I saw a tweet that was going around, making the rounds, and it was something like, one of the things that we do when we are training doctors in this country, I'm not sure how prevalent it is around the world, but in the United States, our idea of training doctors is just this really inhuman, grueling thing we put them through. We grind them, you know, we make them work 36 hours or more, you know, with no breaks hardly, and just grind them to dust to build them into doctors, and how that they think that is tied to how ableist doctors can be. Because from their perspective, they made it through some of the worst, right?
Yeah.
So their ability to have compassion for people who can't do the same is very limited, you know. Again, like you said, that, well, I did it, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense to me, anyway. And especially, like, having worked in kitchens and stuff, there's always been that, like, one-upsmanship of, well, I worked a 14-hour day yesterday. Well, I pulled a double, and I didn't even go to sleep last night. And it's always, like, people trying to outdo one another with how exhausted they are. And then if you complain at all about, I didn't get that much sleep, well, at least you got some sleep.
Yep.
That sounds pretty good. Like...
Yep.
And so nobody ever says anything because all of a sudden everybody, it's like this weird badge of honor that you're killing yourself for.
Absolutely.
Why? You know?
Yep. You become proud of the fact that you're, like, killing yourself for this job that really means nothing. You know, to make somebody else rich or whatever the fuck. Yeah. Anywho.
Anyway, capitalism is a trap. So... Going back on to the moment where, first of all, I do want to mention also that Arya is watching Anguy, like, nail everybody with arrows, and she stops and is kind of like, yo, I better learn how to do that, because it seems like arrows are pretty dope and useful.
Yeah, this is like the second or third time we've seen her be like, because didn't he offer to teach her one time earlier, and somebody was like, it's a waste of time, or some shit like that, right?
I don't remember that. I believe you, because I don't think that's there, but I just don't remember.
Yeah, I feel like at one point somebody was, like, offering to teach her, and for whatever reason, they got, like, the kibosh. It was like, no, you're not. I can't remember why, whether it was she wasn't worth it, or she wasn't going to be with them long enough, or whatever. His time was better used, but there was definitely a moment where she was like, that is very interesting, how you kill people from far away. I would like to hear more about this. There's also this one guy, this one sept, who is talking to them and telling them how this all came to be. And he's telling them that, you know, lions had come through, I think it is he's talking about, and tortured everybody trying to find out where they hide their gold.
Yeah.
And nobody would tell, and they kept killing, and finally they got to him, and somebody's like, how did you survive? Because there's only 8 of you left when there used to be, like, 40 or something. And I think it's the guy who's like, how did you survive? And he's like, it was me. I ended up telling them where the gold was hidden when it was my turn. And Thoros says to him, the only shame was not telling them at once.
I like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really did love that. Yeah.
Because he clearly feels so bad about the fact that he just spilled the beans.
Mm-hmm.
But Thoros has his fucking priorities straight over here.
Yeah.
It's just like, or everybody could have just told, and then this wouldn't have happened. And I think that's a kind of a good point. Not that, people should be blamed for their own torture, but the fact that apparently there was, because he phrases it like they thought there was gold hidden. And he phrases it like, but there wasn't. And then you find out, oh no, there definitely was. I was kind of like, well, guys, then come on, just get them out of here then. But there's also the possibility that you tell them, they get it, and then they kill you all anyway.
Yeah, that definitely is a thing that happens.
But then even if they did that, what would it matter? You hadn't been tortured first anyway, so that's good. One might think.
One would hope. I love this bit too. They all share the night at this place with these people who survived, and they feed them a little bit of food. And Arya notices that they never ask anybody their names, and she's like, "They know. They have to know. They know who we are."
Yeah.
I mean, look at Lord Beric. He's wearing the lightning bolt on the breastplate right now.
And looks like a fucking corpse.
Right? And then one of the priests are like, you're not going to pray to that fucking fake god of yours while you're in our house. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys in the group is like, you can't tell us nothing. We just saved you. And is it Beric or is it Thor? I think it's Lord Beric who's just like, no, we're in their house. We will fucking honor their rules.
Yeah.
Don't act like you don't have no home training.
Beric has a couple of moments where he is just like, dude, what the fuck though? And I found it really like the moment where Arya is looking at him and he's like, hey, do I scare you?
I loved all of that.
She's like, I thought you were dead. And he's interrupted by
Lem. Lem is like, oh, it was just a wound. It was really, really bad. But it was just a wound. And Thoros fixed him right up. He always does.
There's never been no better healer. And Beric just looks at him and gives him, it says, a queer look in his good eye and no look at all in the other. Only scars and dried blood. No better healer, he agreed wearily.
Yeah.
Only scars and dried blood. Ah, yes, the healing magic of lore.
I love this. I love so much about all of this. Because he doesn't challenge them, right? He's just like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Yes. And tells him, it's probably time to go change the watch. Why don't you go take care of that? And he leaves, and then he tells Arya with what I like about this also is even though she's a child and he's being sort of gentle with her, he's also being really honest and talking to her kind of like an adult.
Yeah.
And I always love when people engage with children on a level that does not assume that they're stupid and they can't take real information, that they can't appreciate honesty. So he tells her first, shade to Lem. He's like, you know what? Some people, even though they're great guys and you love them and they're loyal, they just can't face the truth. They will blind themselves to what they are afraid to see.
Yeah. And
then Thoros is right there and he just says point blank, how many times have you brought me back? And this is when it's like, look, we already knew this was happening, right? But I feel like this is the first time where it's straight up like, oh yeah, you died 7 times. Mm-hmm. And the first time I brought you back, we find out was not even what was happening. It wasn't supposed to bring him back.
Right? I do love too that when he says, how many times have you brought me back? Thoros is like, well, the Lord of Light does it. I don't. And he's just like, shut the fuck up. How many times?
Right.
Answer the fucking question.
I just asked you a question. Didn't answer all of this fucking... I don't know if it's real or sincere humility, but it's just us here. Just answer the question.
I am but a conduit for whatever.
And we find out that it's been 6 times, and Thoros says to Lord Beric that you have been kind of reckless too. Like, is death so great that you keep running out to meet it? And we find, like, he goes through showing different wounds. This man is fucked up, y'all.
Indeed.
I know we had a description of his body not too long ago, but my God. He's got this fucking... His head is all, like, caved in. Mm-hmm. He's got the bruise around his neck. He's got this... under his breastplate, he's just a whole mess.
Literally and figuratively, whole mess.
And between the Hound and the Mountain, he's died 3 times by a Clegane.
That really must... You gotta start having a grudge at some point.
Right? Like, this is the thing, too, right? He doesn't seem to have any sort of, like, malice about these people who killed him. He's just like, well, death will happen.
Oh, man.
And, Arya is listening to all this, and, Thoros is listening, but Thoros is much more, Beric is kind of being, like, tongue-in-cheek about it, like, making a little joke about the Cleganes, and Thoros is there, and it feels much more solemn.
Yeah.
And we find out also, and this is really sad, that Beric, like, the more he dies, it comes back, the less he's able to remember parts of his life anymore.
Yeah.
He can't remember really anything about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
He can't remember, like, who knighted him, what are his favorite foods, and it ends with him being like, "Are you my mother, Thoros?" Which is just like, oh. I know he doesn't mean that literally, like, "Are you my mom?"
Yeah.
But, like, just the idea that Thoros has given birth to him, has rebirthed him so many times, and the life that was his before he died doesn't feel quite as real as the one that he's experiencing every time Thoros brings him back. Yeah. Arya's like, "Could you bring back a man without a head?" Questions that need answers.
I fucking love... And she says, like, "Could you bring back a man without a head?" Like, she's being really subtle about what she means.
It could be any guy who recently lost his head. I don't want you to read into it too much, what I'm asking you.
Oh, my God. There's just something about that I was just like, oh, sweetie.
And you can tell, and when she says just the once, like, not even 6 times, almost like a bargain. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not even asking you to do it as many times as you've already done it. I just want it just one time.
Yeah. And
they have to tell her, one, that Thoros is like, again, I don't have magic. I only have prey. That's all I bring to the table. But basically, no, I couldn't. And then he tells the story of bringing Beric back that first time, which turned out to just be sort of a death ritual. Mm-hmm. Like a peculiar one. They call it God's own kiss. And he fills his mouth with fire and breathed the flames inside of Beric down his throat to his lungs and his heart and his soul. The last kiss, it's called. And he had seen a couple priests do it, and he'd even tried it once or twice himself. But he does it, and it brings Beric back to life.
Can you imagine?
I was about to say, bitch, I was about to say, holy shit. He just says, like, never before had I felt a dead man shudder as the fire filled him, nor seen his eyes come open. But I feel like that is really underselling what that moment was like.
I know that it's a good thing they don't have my instincts, but my response would be, kill it! Oh my God!
Meanwhile, God is saying, we're like, bitch, I'm in the middle of a miracle. What are you doing?
I've seen one too many zombie movies, my friends. I am not about to take chances with that. Thank you. Especially because it's all happening because you were, like, near its mouth. Nope.
Yeah. And, Arya starts to cry, or starts to fill her eyes well with tears anyway, because, as she puts it, Thoros used a lot of words, but all they meant were no. And that much she understood. And Beric sees this, isn't it? And he sees it and says to her, your father was a good man, You know, Harwin has told me a lot about him. For his sake, I would gladly forgo your ransom, but we need the gold too desperately.
And I like that at this point, she had been like, I can't believe you do this. And then when he says it here, she's like, yeah, I'll really do, though. She's starting to see the reasoning behind all of this.
Yeah, it's starting to sort of... She's starting to get what it is they're doing, even though I won't say like that she agrees and she's ready to like join in or anything, but it's starting to make sense a little bit to her. And she's thinking to herself about, they just got all this gold from the Hound, and the first thing they did was turn around and give it away, you know, to go help get provisions. And she starts thinking to herself, what if Robb won't pay the ransom, though?
This was so awful. I hated this.
You guys, this was so sad. And they're like, why would you even think such a thing? And I was also like, why would you even think such a thing? But all she can think about is how disappointing she always was to her mother. She wasn't as good as Sansa. She didn't like to cook and sing. And basically just thinking, I was always such a troublemaker. I never listened. Why would anybody want to ransom me? Because children, you know, little kids, even though, like, I appreciate when you can have a conversation with a child and speak to them in a way that's not demeaning or belittling or patronizing, you also have to be mindful of how children process information and the way children will often... remember how... Oh, I don't know if they still do this, but when I was a little kid and divorce was really becoming like a big thing in our country, like in a way that was being covered in pop culture and media, like the divorce rate skyrocketed when I was a kid, you know, and it was a topic.
It's so weird how it's like right around the time women could get their own bank account.
Right? It's shocking. There's no correlation whatsoever. But there's a whole thing about like, I remember like specials that would be like, children, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourselves if your parents get divorced. It was like a huge thing, you know, because little kids would think, oh, if I had gotten better grades, you know, mom and dad would still be together. Like, you know, when you're a little kid, you kind of center yourself into spaces and situations that really aren't about you, and make your part in it bigger, and oftentimes taking much more responsibility than is due you. So all she can think is all the time she was kind of a pain in the ass. And really is afraid that is going to be what keeps her family from wanting to rescue her.
I hated it.
Yeah.
It's so funny, too, with that, like, you know, that messaging around it's not your fault to kids of divorce. And, like, that was never an issue for me at all.
Oh, no?
Not even remotely. I was like, my parents are bad together. Look at them. Of course it's not my fucking fault. I don't have to say a word. I just sit here and watch them bicker. It's definitely not me. I am fine. I would like for them to divorce as soon as possible, and they keep putting it off for reasons that I don't understand. And I am 18, and they're finally starting to do it, and I'm like, wow.
Oh my God, they really stayed together for you. But they stayed together for you.
For why? What did I get out of it? Getting to watch them fight for an extra 10 years.
Extra trauma. You got extra trauma for that. It's supersized trauma.
Oh my God. So irritating.
I'm so happy. My parents split up when I was like a baby, so I don't have any of that like divorce baggage. My parents were always separated as far as I know. So I really dodged a bullet on that one.
So, in other words, I understand like what Arya is thinking here in a intellectual way, but I never had this sort of hang up myself. And I don't know, maybe that's like saying something about me, that I took absolutely no responsibility the way that a lot of people do. And now I'm like an adult, and maybe that's a problem. I don't know. But it's just something that I see represented a lot in media and have no real relationship to that feeling at all.
And And also, she's so young too. Like, she's just like a little kid. I love too that she lies about how old she is in like a page or two later. But she is saying, well, she's also wondering like what will happen to me if they don't. And Lord Beric says to her, first, there's of course they will ransom for you. Why would they not? Like, don't even think such a thing. But if for some reason they don't, because she is really insistent, like, but what if they don't?
Do you have a backup plan, sir?
Right? Like, what is the plan for me? And he says that he would probably send her back to Lady Smallwood for a little while. And he's like, but I'm telling you, that's not going to be necessary. I'm certain it will be fine. But then, if that doesn't happen, maybe I could send you back to my own castle of Blackhaven. But again, that will not be necessary.
Bless him. He's trying.
I know, right? It's so cute. And she makes him swear. Do you swear? And because in her mind, people have been promising this for a minute now. Mm-hmm. And so far, she's not home. And then we have a little bit later, this is when Gendry asks, is it possible for him to like join up, that he could be a smith? Mm-hmm. You know, he's got these skills, he was an apprentice, and he, you know, could help fix weapons and this, that, and the other thing. And Arya is just like, fuck, he's going to leave me too, huh?
Yeah. And I love the reaction of all the guys, because I was trying to think of like an equivalent for this, and all I could think was somebody who's like really good at programming or something. Mm-hmm. But they all are like, dude, you don't want to join up? You're a fucking smith in training. People really will line up to give you a place to stay. You should not stay here. You're going to die. Why would you do that? And he basically is just like, I prefer to work for an ethical company. Thank you.
Basically, right? Like, yeah, he's like, I see what's out here. I see what the other companies are doing. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really jibe with me and my personal moral standing.
Yes.
He's like, I don't need to be paid a lot. All I need is, like, a place to sleep and food, you know, and low-key companionship. And I'll be good. Mm-hmm. And he straight up says, I've seen, like, he names 2 other people that he's comparing how they behave, like, versus how he's seen Beric behave.
Yeah.
And Gendry's just like, yeah, I think I want to throw in with you guys. And in the middle of him being knighted by Lord Beric is when the fucking hound is just like, what does he say when he walks up? I'm trying to think of the first thing he says. Make it more nights, Dondarrion.
I ought to kill you all for all over again for that. Lord Beric faced him coolly. I'd hoped we'd seen the last of you, Clegane. How did you come to find us? It wasn't hard. You made enough bloody smoke to be seen in Old Town. And this is when, what about the sentries? And he's like, what about the sentries?
Maybe I killed them. What you gonna do about it if I did? So they're all like, the guys in the group are like low-key like pulling weapons out, and you know, like it's about to really go down. And the hound is, you know, peeping all of that and just trying to tell people, you know, calm down. You really don't want that right now with me. And he tells them, I am here to get my gold. You stole my shit. I want it back. I can't even get a decent meal because you didn't leave me any fucking money. And I'm thinking, because I couldn't remember what happens and how Arya ends up on the road with the hound. So I guess what's happening is that he ends up kidnapping her for the ransom. Because he doesn't have any money. That's how they end up back together, right?
I do not remember.
I feel like that's the direction we got to be going in, right? Because unless they don't end up together at all in the books, and I just don't see that as being possible. So my brain is like, how the fuck do they get back together? And then when we got to this chapter, I was like, oh shit. is he going to just snatch her up? Is that what happened? And I don't know why I cannot remember it from the show. No matter how hard I try to remember, I cannot remember. But, so they threaten him. He is not really concerned about the threats.
No, not at all.
Telling them he wants his fucking money. He wants his shit. And they're threatening him. We'll do this. We'll do that. He is not impressed. He's not afraid. And then he just leaves.
I like it too. At one point, Gendry is like, "Yeah, they're feeding the people whose crops you burned," and Sandor is like, "Oh, really? Is that the story? Okay, sure. As it happens, that's just what I meant to do with it. Feed a bunch of ugly peasants and their poxy whelps." "You're lying," said Gendry. Ah, Gendry.
Oh my God. Like,
babe.
Right. It's not really a lie when you know that you're not meaning what you say. And this is when he's like, "Yo, you're gonna make a little girl a knight to an 8-year-old girl." She yells out that she's 12. "I could be a knight if I wanted, and I could have killed you, only Lim took my knife." And he says, "Well, complain to Lim, not to me."
I love that. And she says, "Next time I will kill you, and I'll kill your brother too." No. His dark eyes narrowed. "That you won't."
I love that.
And then he just turns away from her.
Right? That's just a real quick, no, that's what I'm going to do. That's mine. You can't have what's mine. And then right back to the conversation.
I love the idea of the two of them racing toward Gregor Clegane to see who can kill him first. So this is
Arya's meanwhile hoping that they'll kill him for real this time.
Yes. And he's like, "Your God said that I was wasn't guilty." He says, like, proclaimed my innocence or something. And guiltless. That's it. Your own God said I'm guiltless. The Lord of Light gave you back your life. He did not proclaim you Baelor the Blessed come again.
I love when somebody is like, "We didn't rob you. We just foraged you. We've been good and foraged."
So then we have this moment where Sandor Clegane looked at their faces, every one, as if he were trying to commit them all to memory. Then he walked back out into the darkness and the pouring rain from whence he'd come, with never another word. The outlaws waited, wondering. Ellipses. And there is something about that moment. I know it says that he, like, turned around and walked away, but I picture it as him backing slowly out of the room while keeping eye contact with all of them and doing that thing where you point at your eyes and then you point your fingers at them.
It does not say he turned around.
Doesn't it? Oh, it says then he walked back out into the darkness. You're right. So that's fair.
Maybe.
There's just something so like, yeah, I'll be around. I've got my eye on y'all.
Close by. And after he leaves, they're all like, "Oh, well, this is now another thing we got to be worried about. God damn it! I guess we better go look outside to see where, how far away he went or where he's at." And they go out and they check on the fucking sentries, and that's when we find out that they were just sleeping.
They were just snoozing, and they're so mad about it. And they're also talking about where he got the gold and that it was probably from winning this tourney. And then a bunch of the Hound has lost more than a few bags of coin. He has lost his master and kennel as well. There is something about this world and the fact that everybody's got these names and these sigils, so then nothing is ever just said. It's always couched in the metaphor of whatever the creature is that their house represents or whatever. So you're not like, "Oh yeah, well he just doesn't have any place to go or anybody to give him orders. The dog has lost his kennel and his master." Can we just say things the way that you say them?
No.
But we definitely cannot.
No, we cannot. Somebody else is like, well, then let me feather the dog a few times. And like, we're just going to keep going with that. The Lord of Light is not yet done with Joffrey's hound, it would seem.
It's very ominous.
Yeah. And so also, nobody can get like any decent rest with him just out in the darkness, roaming around, being all unhinged and shit. So nobody's sleeping well. And she's like tried to curl up by the fire, and this is when she pulls out her coin. And she is thinking about how she's not as powerful as she was when she could just kill with a whisper.
Mm-hmm.
And she's thinking about how Jaqen left, and Hot Pie left, and Gendry is leaving, and Lami died, and Euron died, and Syrio died, and her father died, and it's just bad.
Yeah.
And all she's got to show for it is this stupid iron penny. And then she does her list of names, and it's mentioned that she can't really picture them all as clearly as she once could.
Mm-hmm.
Like Raph and Dunson and Polliver, she can barely picture their faces at all anymore. Even the Tickler is starting to fade from memory.
This is something I always find interesting, the realization that something that you've like nurtured for a long time is growing unfamiliar, and that how like unmoored you get over it.
Yep.
I know this happens when people die, and
all
then
the
you
time.
start to realize like, oh, I don't even remember what their face looked like or what color their eyes were, or like did they have long eyelashes, like just things like that, and it starts to make you go, did I even care about them at all? And it's like, of course you did. It's just
right.
And some of it's just grief, like protecting you as well.
Yeah, it's for me, like how the sound of people's voices tend to be one of the first things that go, is like really trying to remember what they sounded like, and I try to like hold on to those as best I can, especially. And we talked about this before, like, just take videos of your friends and your family and your loved ones, guys. Just do it. I know it's dopey, but do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because they're just, all of these people that I loved, and there's no record of there's no recording of their voices anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough that, we might have pictures at least, but capturing how someone sounds, and once they're gone, it's just gone forever. That sound is gone forever. So yeah, that sort of feeling the memories kind of like slip away. Mm-hmm. And it can be stuff that you could swear you would never forget.
Yeah.
And even like good shit. There's some nights I had as a kid or as a young adult, and I just wanted to burn every inch of the experience into my brain so I never lost it. And then now I look back and try to recall, and I'm like, how did we get there that night? Or who all was with us?
Yeah.
Like they go. That's what memories do. So. She says that she's hearing all the wolves outside, and she just says, I hope they eat the hound.
I love that. The simplicity of it. You know what? I hope they eat his ass. Yeah, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, because he said something to her earlier, too, about wolves and dogs. She's like, do you know what dogs do to wolves? And I was like, that seems backwards. But I guess he knows.
This is the danger of staying within the fucking metaphor of what you're. It doesn't always work. This is all I'm saying. So okay, it ends with Gendry telling her that he's sorry.
Yeah,
and she gets into her horse before replying because she wants to be able to look down on him.
I am so here for that.
I love it so much.
I'm so here for that.
If you want to be some stupid outlaw knight and get hanged, why should I care? I'll be at River Run, ransomed with my brother. There was no rain that day, thankfully, and for once, they made good time.
She thinks to herself when he shows up, like, you could have made swords at River Run. Like, you could have come with me. You didn't have to do this. But she doesn't say that to him. And I bet that thought never even occurred to him.
I understand his choice. Like, it makes a lot of sense. But, of course, I also understand her feeling this way.
Like, he is I mean, he doesn't have that nifty dog metaphor to run with, but he is, like, out here unmoored as well. You know, he doesn't have a house, he doesn't have a clan, he doesn't have a family, he has no one. Mm-hmm. You know, he's never made it to the Night's Watch, so he has to find family. And he could have gone to River Run and been a smith and probably been done okay there, but it was like when whoever it was, one of the other brothers was telling him, like, you know, that kind of job, you can have some real career options. You don't got to settle for just us. But, like we said earlier, I think his choice really was about so much more than just, like, finding a place where he could be a smith. It's about these other things as well, you know?
Yeah. Yep, definitely. It's an interesting idea to think about, like, having absolutely nobody. Because I've always had a big family, but I've never really been close to most of them. And so it's been kind of a weird thing where I'm like, I have people around, but if I turned up, they would not know me. And how much does that matter? Because sometimes families are just like, you're one of us now, and that's it. And It's only the blood, and that's all they care about. And they're like, well, of course I'm going to care for you. You're my niece-in-law, twice removed kind of thing. But then there's families that are like, we don't know you, and we didn't really like Uncle John that much, actually. So the fact that you're, like, related here? Isn't really speaking too much for you, actually. But having absolutely nobody is, especially in this, like, setting, you know, that's very terrifying, to be honest.
Think of how vulnerable that makes you in this world, you know, of having no one that can claim you, that can vouch for you, that can throw the weight of their protection around you, you know. It's difficult for me to imagine that my life is my family, you know, there's just fucking so many of us. Even though a lot of us are gone, in my more immediate family, I still come from, like, a big-ass family. And even now, I'm just like, oh, there's too many of us. And I don't even see that much of my family that often anymore because a lot of them live different places. But it's hard for me to even imagine that, you know?
Yeah.
That kind of, like, just utter sort of aloneness. Like, not being connected to anyone that you know of by blood. And I understand that blood is not, like, the end-all, be-all in the ways that we form families. I'm not saying that. But I do want to speak to the sort of very specific nature of being connected to people by blood and what that can mean. And trying to imagine what it's like to just not have any connection in that way is so beyond what I can even really imagine.
Yeah.
You know, I can't even think what that looks like. Yeah.
So that is the end of the chapter. Is it didn't rain and they made good time, and that's how it wraps up. Arya's chapters always tend to end on a really, like, super practical note. I've noticed, where the emotion of whatever just happened is sort of ignored in a way that feels really, like, in character.
Yeah. That's a really good point that you mentioned, because she definitely, even when she's in her own brain and she's thinking whatever she's thinking about, even when it's fantastical, it's still kind of practical. Yeah. Like, she's hearing all the wolves. She just had this confrontation with the hound. I hope they eat him. You know, it is filled with, like, the deep loathing she has for him and how much she wants him dead. But it's also very, very practical.
Yes. I appreciate it. It makes me think of, like, the chapter where they escape from Harrenhal. And, you know, she's just committed murder for the first time. I guess it's not the first time, but it's, like, a pretty brutal way that she does it.
Yeah, and it was the first time I think that it's not, like, in actual self-defense.
Yeah.
You know, this is murder.
And she just, as they're riding away, thinks about how it's fine, the rain will wash off all the blood. And that's, like, her thought about it. It's just this extremely, like, I'm not going to engage with the reality of what I did. I'm just going to talk about how it will be fine.
We are really watching her sort of fragment, you know. Mm-hmm. Her brain sort of is starting to compartmentalize, and we're really seeing her take, like, even this bit when she's fearful that Robb won't pay the ransom, and she's listing all the reasons why she thinks he might not, like all the ways in which she sort of failed and that her mother was disappointed in her. Even when she's going through that and she starts to have tears in her eyes, it's not like a deep spiraling into like the depth of the emotion of that moment.
No.
You know? It's just like, well, maybe he won't because A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. You know? Yeah, I hate that. Like, I don't want to say we're watching the making of a monster, but low-key. I don't know. I feel like if this is how it was done, this is probably how it was done.
Interesting.
But, yeah. All right. Then.
All right.
Well, I guess that's it.
Yeah. I'm going to say hi to new patrons real quick. So, of course, as usual, sorry if you guys can hear that. I moved my desk around, so I'm facing a different direction. And my mirror is, like, next to me, and I keep elbowing it because I forget it's there. It's very tight in here. So if you hear weird, like, sounds of something moving, it's probably my giant mirror that Owen got me as a gift that is right next to my desk. It's not great, but there's literally no place else to put it. Anyway, so new patrons. We've got Maria Viagra and Tia Pope. Thank you so much to both of you for pledging and becoming patrons. I sent both of you a little video to say thanks, so hopefully you got those. Actually, Tia did, because I think Tia replied. Thank you, Tia. But yeah, if you sign up for the next month or so, I'm going to try and just reply to each of the new signups with a video saying thanks. And if it doesn't show up for you, check your spam. I think it comes from a weird made-up email address that they give you for that program, so it might not look familiar, but I swear it's me. And just once again, wanting to mention that things have been really tough, and if anybody out there can spare $5 a month to throw in my direction, patreon.com/unspoiled, it would be very helpful and just hugely appreciated. So yeah, go do that and support me, and currently working on some stuff that I think might interest some people also, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Anything else that you feel like adding before we wrap this one up?
No, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you guys again all so much for listening. And make sure to mention us to people that you think might like us. Even if you can't pledge, there's a lot that you can do to help us get new listeners, and that always helps.
Tell your friends
Tell
about
your
us.
Friends. Share our posts on social media. Tag us in the comments section about an argument about Game of Thrones. You know, all that stuff to just make somebody go, wait, what's that? Ooh. It really does work. It's wild. Mm-hmm. So until next time, everybody, thank you again. And toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
Joffrey, Cersei, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, Tywin Lannister.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.